Thanks for joining me, guys. We are here with Khemmis, and we're in Seattle right now over at El Corazon and getting ready for the Decibel tour to kick off, or at least the show for the tour in Seattle to kick off. And wanted to talk with these guys a little bit about their latest record, Hunted. So if you guys wouldn't mind, can you tell me a little bit about the making of the Hunted record and maybe where you recorded it and how'd you enjoy working with Dave Otero as a producer?
Yeah, okay, so it's weird to think that Hunted was already a couple years ago. We started writing Hunted like a week after Absolution came out, and we already had a sort of an idea at that point about where we wanted that album to go in terms of sort of influences and the sort of style that we were trying to hone in on. As for working with Dave Otero, it was terrible. That guy's a real prick. We fucking hate him. He's definitely... Oh, wait. Am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah.
Cool. He actually flew out to Vancouver. He's like guitar teching for us on the rest of the tour. So he's downstairs. He's working real hard right now.
You obviously can't stand him.
Yeah. No, I mean, working with Dave's amazing. He's basically the fifth member of the band at this point. He has a really good ear for melody and structure and has always been really good about coaxing the best performances out of us. I say coaxing. Sometimes it's more like beating the best performances out of us, but still getting us to be the best version of ourselves that we can, and also having an ear for things that we might have missed in the sort of writing process when we have the blinders on and you're months and months into writing, and he says, well, what about this idea, or what if you back this off a little bit? So really, working with him is really what allowed Hunted to be the album that it wound up being.
I'll add that what I really like about Dave, despite the fact that he produces a lot of like deathy and techie stuff, he still gets what we're doing, even though it's not maybe, or wasn't at that time in his wheelhouse per se. He really gets what we were trying to accomplish, and he was able to like focus his mind on that rather than maybe what he would prefer to hear himself.
Yeah, the dude is like one of the biggest Judas Priest fans of all time, so I think he understands like what we're going for generally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So he needs a mic.
Cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the conceptual ideas behind the album artwork, if there's any, and the artists that worked on it?
Okay. I don't want to give away too much, but I think that generally what we were going for with Hunted is to have Sam Turner, who did the first album art also for Absolution. He also does the new one. He's really good at this Frank Frazetta style thing, and Zach was really talking about that you wanted it to be sort of like the Molly Hatchet album covers that Frank Frazetta did, and
yeah, because I feel like those album covers end up being timeless in a way.
Yeah,
they don't look very 90s or early 2000s. They're cool for 60 years, Exactly. And so that was kind of the idea, not for it to be high fantasy necessarily. That wasn't really the idea. It was just let's have kind of a more timeless aesthetic, which sounds kind of self-important or whatever, but that's what we were trying to shoot for, something like that.
Yeah, and so he killed it for the first record, and we were like, well, we kind of like having this wizard as a mascot sort of, but we were like, what if for the second one we kind of threw people for a little bit of a loop and we had a more evil wizard instead, and maybe he's riding an undead horse or something into battle, and then he came up with some sketches for what this was, and then we kind of worked with him to design the back of the album sleeve, which does feature the wizard that's on the first album cover, and also the woman that's on the first album cover, and you'll see a return of these characters for the next one also. So we're kind of trying to tell a little bit of a storyline, I think, through the images, and I think it should be really up to people's interpretation, kind of how they see that.
That's cool.
I think it's worth pointing out, too, that we try to have the album art tell a story that operates largely independently of the story that we're telling in the lyrics.
Yeah.
Sometimes people assume that all our lyrics are going to be about, Dungeons and Dragons, and it's not. It's generally about misery and dying. But we like the idea of still having that cohesive visual aesthetic that people can sort of build their own sort of internal narrative around, and they can have their own sort of imagined storyline, regardless of whether or not we think that's what the Wizards are actually doing.
Yeah, it's cool. Makes for interesting album card viewing.
Yeah, totally.
We're all big fans of holding records in our hands and looking at the image and looking at the lyrics, you know. So it's important to us that it has something there.
Absolutely.
That's great. All right, cool. Thanks. For the record, was there a theme or inspiration for this record as you began to put it together?
I think musically, like, we were trying to just kind of do the things that we thought were the coolest aspects of, like, what we do as a band, because we kind of figured that out on Absolution, and then we wanted to just kind of, like, highlight those elements more, which are, like, the harmonized guitars and, like, riffs and, you know, kind of dramatic vocals and things like that, and storytelling. And then a lot of the lyrics were kind of inspired by, like, sort of the evolution of, like, a series of dreams that I've had my whole life, starting with, like, night terrors that I had as a kid and, like, sleep paralysis and all these other things, kind of trying to weave, like, a story out of those images that I've kind of had my whole life that ended up telling a narrative that was personal to me, but that I think people can read their own experiences into. That was kind of the idea, at least, behind sort of what the storytelling is about on that record.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah, choose your own adventure.
Choose your own adventure. I like that.
Cool. All right, so just so you guys know, I'm going to be playing 3 songs from the record, and what I'll do is I'll kind of splice some of these fragments together and kind of build the show around your album. And so I'm going to play the following songs: Above the Water, Three Gates, and Beyond the Door. And what I'm hoping to do is give everyone, like, a deeper sense of the record. So if there's anything or anyone's story around these particular songs about the writing process or maybe the recording of it that I can kind of put into the show, that would be cool.
I've got some stuff for Three Gates. You got
Yeah.
some stuff for Above the Water?
You want to start? Okay. So, like, for Above the Water, I guess, like, the image that I was trying to portray was that I used to have this dream, even sometimes when I was awake when I was a kid, that would just terrify me, where I was, like, sitting on, like, a boat in the ocean at night, and I could see that there was, like, another boat off in the distance that I knew that, like, my family and everyone that I'd ever loved was on, and I was just watching it sink slowly, and I was, like, completely helpless, but that there was, like, a light, like, shining on the boat that was, like, you know, slowly submerging in the water. And that image was, like, deeply terrifying to me as a kid. And so I tried to write kind of like a whole narrative about just that image with that song. And then I think that I've kind of attributed my own meanings to, like, what the ocean symbolizes and, you know, all these aspects of the image, just kind of contending with it throughout my life. But that's basically, like, the story behind what inspired the lyrics for that song, at least. And I think I try to write sort of like a sea shanty, like, type melody and rhythm for the vocals for the chorus, to kind of reflect that sort of nautical theme. I don't know whether that translates or not, but that was kind of how I was thinking about it.
That's cool. Randy's our expert nautical metal guy. So
Okay.
he can let us know.
It's not Hailstorm or anything, but, you know.
Nothing is.
Yeah.
Cool. That sounds dark, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Three Gates is actually about a horrifying dream that I've been having ever since I was a kid of waking up in a life that is a perfect version, a sort of, like, idealized version of your own, but you know that it's not your life and you have no control over the world that you've woken up into, and nothing makes sense because everything is so perfect, and that's not the way life works. And which I think means that I was a more fucked up kid than I ever realized, but that terrified me, the idea of everything is perfect except I know that everything isn't perfect. And so there's a line that says, you know, 3 gates to hell before me, the sea, the sky, my mind, with this Kia blade release me. There's only one way out of it. And it was just a way to sort of put into lyrical form this sort of, not just fear, but like a disgust connected to the idea of a perfect life, because a perfect life would be a really unsatisfying one. It would lack the sort of struggle that characterizes meaningful existence. Mm-hmm. And then we had our friend Grant Netzord come sing on it because he's got a cool voice, and we were like, "Hey, Grant, you want to do that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And there we go. That's 3 gates. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought it was about a game show where you get to, like, choose a door and see what prize is behind it.
That's a really like fucked up version of my dream, man.
Yeah.
If you pick the right one, it kills you. Like, oh, I'm a winner.
Okay, and then for Beyond the Door, I've had like a number of people like ask me what this song is about and like try to come up with their own sort of interpretation, and I feel ready to dispel a little bit of the mystery behind at least like the image. Again, like I don't want to get into like the meaning of things, but like so I have a friend who also suffers from sleep paralysis, like a lot more. Like I've only ever had it like a few times, but I like he has it like very frequently. And he used to be a roommate of mine, and he had this house where he had like his bed facing a window, and across the street, like a block down that you could see was a middle school. And one night he woke up with sleep paralysis, which is where you can't move, and you typically like your brain is still sort of dreaming, and so you see like things that aren't there, and it's like can be cripplingly like terrifying, like seeing dark figures in the corner like leaning over towards you and things like this. But so he awoke to see the middle school burning down out of the window of his room, and I just imagined that image kind of through my own experience being terrifying and thinking that it was also affecting me. And so I kind of wrote the story from the perspective of like someone who awakes with sleep paralysis in a house that's burning down. And like, you could only imagine like how terrifying that would be. So that's kind of like the inspiration behind that story in that song.